I'm back to working on the curved laminates for the front of the desk. As you recall, there's two of these. They're pillars either side of the desk. And what I'm trying to do right now is get one true edge, which is going to be flat and perpendicular to the sides in both this plane and this plane. And to do that, I'm using my oscillating belt sander to sand off little parts of this bottom here until this sits true on a table, and I can come in with a square and not only measure squareness this way, but measure squareness this way as well. So that's what I'm doing, and once that's done, then I can use other tools, using this as a reference edge, other tools such as a table saw and so forth to square up the rest of the piece. Okay, so we've done a little bit of sanding. And now I'm going to see if we were able to make the small correction that I wanted to make. Now that's pretty good. And then this part here is a little bit of a challenge. You have to sight along this line and make sure you've got some trueness this way as well. So, with one side trued up, I wanted to show you how I'm going to cut the other side on the table saw in as safe a manner as I know. I've placed a block and clamped it here, and that block is designed to support the back edge of the piece, which I've already cut one obviously, so that where the blade does the cutting is actually the piece is against the table. So I would be pretty much doing this operation. I'd have to guide it myself at first and then pick up on the block, and now it's resting on the block. Continue on through, keeping my hands well away from the blade. What I'm worried about is this piece getting cocked and causing kickback, and so I want plenty of support as I just roll it on up, and then when I get to the end of the cut and the waste falls off, I just have to let it pivot up and out of the blade, and I'm done. There's no chance of kickback. So I'll show you how I do it on the remaining piece. There we are. We've safely cut through this piece. Now I'm going to have to do this cut again because I've cut it oversized. I'm not going to trim it to final length until I get the bevel correct on the edges. Here's the question. How do you take a bent lamination like this, which is rough on the edges? I mean, you've just laminated together several pieces of material and the edge is just rough, and turn it into something that can sit flat on a surface, or in the case of these curved parts of the desk, can sit flat up against the front of the carcasses of the desk and have it actually fit perfectly. Well, that's a good question, and it took a while to figure out the answer. When you see the next jig, you'll understand how we got to this point. The solution is to take the bending form that was used to make these laminates and modify it to become a sled, if you will, to hold the work as you send it through the saw. This particular bending form, what I did was I went ahead and put some end pieces here that would act as a surface on the table, to slide on the table. I built it up with a little plywood, made sure everything was square, put a little cross piece in here so that this piece could then be raised up on edge like this and safely pushed through the saw. So there, the cuts took, less than 30 seconds each to make. The jig, to do it safely and accurately, on the other hand, it took hours to design and make. So it pays to spend time making a good, safe jig that can do your curved work and hold it accurately and safely and get a quality product at the end. The final use for the bending form for these front columns is as a base for sanding. I could just clamp the bending form into the bench and then just lay this on top, and it'll hold pretty well while I sand. And since there's really no good way to clamp this piece, it works just fine. The curved trim that goes around the bottom of the front curved pillars. I've cut some walnut, excuse me, 3 layers equaling about 1/4 inch of thickness, and I'm going to bend this around a form in a vacuum bag to make that trim. I've cut it a little wide. It's almost 2.5 inches wide. I want to get 2 inches out of it, so I've got plenty to trim off. This is not going to be a highly stressed joint, so I'm just going to go ahead and use Titebond 3 instead of Unibond. It's faster, it'll dry faster, and like I say, there's very little stress in this joint. Here we go, yet another use for the bending form that I used to make the front column. I can use that same form to make the trim. The trim will have a little bit tighter radius, which is good because it will help offset the spring back. It'll work out just fine. The front vertical curved laminations join with the side, and at that joint there's a piece of walnut trim that I think you can see in the picture, vertical. It's 4 of them, 1 on each side of each curved lamination. And that walnut trim has to be mitered, or at least joined at the correct angle to wrap around that edge. I've measured that angle as 35.5 degrees. In order to get that, here's one of the finished pieces. You can see what this looks like. In order to get that, I had to make a form on which I could clamp these 2 pieces and have them join at this very short 1/4 inch wide edge. Now that'll be a strong joint because it's all long grain the entire length, but you got to get that joint right, and you got to somehow hold these small pieces and clamp them. So this is simply a piece of 4x4 cut to the correct angle, 35.5 degrees, such that I can then lay the pieces on here, clamp them, actually it goes like this, clamp them in place. I've got the back relieved so it can seat a clamp, and clamp the one piece in place and then clamp the other piece to it with the glue drying, and it seems to work fine. Okay, you can see I've got the one piece clamped on. By the way, this form has clear packing tape on it, so the glue squeeze out from the back won't stick to the wood, and I'll be able to take it apart. Now, I said this is a joint, but it's not a mitered joint, it's an overlapping joint. I've cut the same 35.5 degree angle on both pieces so that the one piece overlaps the other. I glue it in place with just a slight bit of overhang, a little bit proud, so I can come back and just give it a couple of quick swipes with a plane and bring everything down nice and flat. These pieces are also book matched. I resawed them from the same plank so that when they open up, the grain will seem to logically wrap around the entire column piece. And here you go, it's all clamped up. I probably used a little more glue than I needed to, but that's okay, that'll come right off, and we'll get a decent joint there for this vertical trim. Here I am using a 50-degree plane iron in a low angle smooth plane to clean up the corners that are on the drawer side of the desk. Those corners I've basically glued up right angle pieces here to go in place there, and use a 50-degree bevel iron. I minimize any tear out, get a nice smooth surface that's practically ready to finish. Then after planing, I spray it on down with water to raise the grain before I seal it with shellac and then use water-based aniline dye. Of course, I'll be sanding this after the grain is raised. Okay, we've got these 4 trim pieces that are going to go on the corners where the drawer fronts are, and this is just beautiful walnut. I know you can't really see it as well, but this is just really nice stuff. And that's why we're going to use an aniline dye, because we can stain it and still keep most of the beauty of the wood, because the dye is transparent. It simply darkens the surface. It does not obscure it. We're just going to go ahead and lay this on and let it soak in for a little bit and wipe it on off. I'm gluing on the side trim now. Here's a piece. I got one piece already glued on. I've separated the drawer box from the rest of the carcass so that I can get clamps running a long ways to clamp this on. So I made a mark here of where this goes, because this drawer has to fit underneath there. So I've got to be very careful that I get this in the right place. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue that on now. Some people might use brads to hold trim on. I personally just don't like to do that. I like my finished face to be as flawless as I can make it. And of course, if there was brads, I'd have to be filling in the holes where the heads of the brads are, and I just don't want to do that. Now just put some clamps on front to back. And then all I got to do now is just clean off the glue squeeze out and let it dry. Clamping on the trim on the curved part of the front's a little tricky. There's really no good clamp pressure points except at the top and the bottom, so you can see I've got this pretty well clamped top and bottom. I've got some surgical tubing wrapped around and around to help pull the trim into the veneered wood, and I've got one band clamp in the center with the blocks trying to apply some pressure to the center to give me a little bit of contact, but it's really tough with a glue up like this unless you got some very deep clamps that are 2 feet wide to get good contact. So you got to pretty much rely on the top and the bottom as being your clamping points. Fortunately, it's just trim, so it's not under any structural stress, so we'll be okay on that. Okay, it's time to put the curved lamination trim. I've already cut this exactly to size, so now we're just gluing it in. I have a block here to help register the height in the center so I don't accidentally let it dip down or anything like that, because of course this whole desk is raised up on blocks right now and it's going to end up coming down flush with the floor once I'm done with all these glue ups. So let's go ahead and put some glue on here. And I've already marked what the top and bottom is, so I don't get confused. And now the important thing is just to keep this center through the whole process of gluing. I'm just going to lightly clamp this at first. And I'm using a lot of clamps so I can get good even pressure all along. I don't think it's necessary to make, and for this case, to make a some backing strips to distribute the pressure evenly. The clamps seem to do it just fine. Okay, we just clean up the excess glue squeeze out and let that dry.